Hey everyone, so One Piece chapter 1094 just came out, and to me, Egghead Island is officially just a phenomenal arc. You might be saying, Morge, how could you not have felt that way already? I will say that I'm separating a little bit the actual core storyline at Egghead Island itself from the outside world events. If we take everything into consideration, then obviously everything that's been happening so far ever since we've gotten to Egghead, including the Shanks vs. Kid scene, Blackbeard and Kobe and the entire Hachinosu Island raid, everything that happened at Marijoa and the Reverie, if we're taking all of that into account, we've never really had, a worldwide arc like this before. So obviously Egghead Island was breaking new ground in that regard regardless. But if I'm looking just at the core Egghead Island storyline itself with the Straw Hats, I would say that up till now, I've thought that it's been really good. But this chapter, for me, I think, just put this whole storyline over the top. I think that this was the big moment that kind of just upped the stakes to a level that I don't know any of us really saw coming. Because if you told me before this arc began that in Egghead Island, Luffy would be fighting Admiral Kizaru, I would tell you, that's awesome. That's already a heavyweight matchup that would be a fitting finale for an arc like this that's kicking off the final saga. That's not the case. Luffy versus Kizaru was just the teaser. That was just the warm-up. Gorosei Saturn is the actual definitive big bad boss of this arc, and Oda could not have delivered any better on establishing him in that position. And in doing so, not only does it establish that the stakes of this arc are significantly higher than what we could have imagined, just in the manner in which Gorosei Saturn was, his demon form, his devil form, whatever you want to say, was revealed to us, it immediately shifted the entire tone of the battle to something much more foreboding, much more serious than we could have previously imagined with the general feel and mood that the previous chapters were giving off. Not to say I wasn't enjoying Luffy versus Kizaru, but Saturn just brings a different level of gravity and heaviness to the situation. And that's just the start of it, because with the reveal that Saturn is like this, and with the knowledge that this is just the beginning of the final saga, we now have full understanding that yes, the entire Gorosei that are waiting for us at the end of the story, at the end of One Piece as the final battle, to take down the world government, Imu's entire squad of core subordinates, they are all terrifying monsters, unlike anything that we've seen before, and that means that now our imaginations can really go wild as to how strong and how powerful Imu himself is if just one of his 5 subordinates causes a reaction like this among everybody on that island, every single strong fighter on that island. Luffy, Zoro, Lucci, Kizaru, they all felt it, right? Sorry if I leave out anybody right there, but the majority of strong fighters, let's say, the majority of strong fighters on that island, we've just never seen a ripple effect sort of reaction from one character transforming in One Piece like this, right? It's something you see in a lot of anime, right? Some character goes crazy and other characters from all around in different directions far off can sense that something big is happening. But Oda interestingly never really uses that trope, or at least not that frequently. He doesn't have chills going down everybody's spine, they're all at different locations on an island when one character is getting serious. He just doesn't really invoke that, which is funny because observation haki is a thing, but that's just not something that Oda tends to fall back on. But I feel like that makes it all the more impactful when he pulls it out for something like this. And it's not just the manner in which Saturn was introduced to us, it was the fact that his design is something straight out of a horror movie, right? We've never seen a mythical Zoan like this. This design that we just got, the last time I was this impressed by a character design was Kaido's introduction, and this transformation, this introduction scene, while I wouldn't say is quite on the same level as Kaido's introduction in chapter 795, it's definitely one of the top 5, maybe even better character introductions that we've ever had in the entire story. Just the Pentagon, the fact that the first thing that he did upon transformation was kill a Marine soldier by looking at him in the eye. I have never seen a One Piece villain give off this sense of sheer terror just from their presence. So hats off to Oda for this chapter. Egghead Island officially has become my favorite arc in recent times, and I think the potential for what this arc can become is just, the sky is the limit. We could get anything at this point. We could get Luffy versus Saturn, hopefully, but we could also get a sort of team battle against Saturn. We could see Saturn potentially get a big win here. We could see Saturn completely defeated, and that sending ripple effects throughout the world. We could see maybe the death of a Gorosei. There's so many options that could happen right now. It is wildly exciting because I could never have guessed that this would be the way that Egghead Island sort of snowballed into some sort of absolute world-changing sort of, it is supposed to be a world-changing sort of incident by the end of it, and it really seems like it's about to deliver on that. Now, as for the other events of this chapter, we got the conclusion, in a sense, to Luffy versus Kizaru. The conclusions are, unfortunately, still, the takeaways of it are unfortunately still somewhat vague, simply because we see so one, we understand that Luffy has a very, very, very small time limit that he can use Gear 5th in. This was one of the things that I was voicing my complaints about in previous chapter reviews, and I still maintain that complaint, that it really did not seem like there was any point to using this ability instead of just starting off with Advanced Conqueror's Haki and seeing how that worked, before then trying to use this as basically a last resort so that he could, fight Kizaru on somewhat even terms first before going to his big trump card that he can only use for a short amount of time. I'm not going to harp on that again, but all I can say is basically everything that I said in those previous reviews, I feel like they are 100% correct, because we did get exactly the worst case scenario that I was talking about did end up playing out, which is Luffy just ran out of Gear 5th. However, at the same time, it seems like he did end up using an Advanced Conqueror's Haki attack at the end. Was it definitely Advanced Conqueror's Haki? I don't know. The way Gear 5th works, it seems like, even like we saw even with the Kaido fight, it is going to just make full contact just for the cartoony effect regardless. But there was a lot of Black Lightning. It did seemingly take Kizaru out or something like that, so we can assume it was probably Advanced Conqueror's Haki. But then the question is, was he using it against Kizaru up till now, and we just couldn't see it? That doesn't seem quite right to me either, but then, I don't know, it just leaves so many questions. So if I were to read this fight as basically just, okay, Luffy went to Gear 5th without using Advanced Conqueror's Haki first, for no reason at all, just throwing himself out there on a very tight time limit, even though he's not using his best ability. Again, no reason at all, not explained. Then they have a sort of back and forth battle. Then Luffy finally uses one Advanced Conqueror's Haki attack, and it works, takes out Kizaru, but at the same time, Luffy is now at the end of his time limit, so he's out of the battle as well. I find that pretty dumb, if I'm being frank. The other option is Luffy was using Advanced Conqueror's Haki this entire time, in which case we have no idea when anything's happening at any point ever. Was he using Advanced Conqueror's Haki against Lucci? Does that mean that Lucci can, does Gear 5th, is it just always using Advanced Conqueror's Haki? Because that doesn't really make sense, because then against Lucci, it's like, Lucci can clash evenly with Advanced Conqueror's Haki. Is Lucci an Advanced Conqueror's Haki user? Yada, yada, yada. I mean, Lucci is going even-ish with Zoro basically right now, so that's its whole own discussion. Was Luffy using Advanced Conqueror's Haki against the Seraphim? Do we just assume that Luffy's just always using it, Gear 5th or not, Gear 4th or not? What? There's so many questions that come out of this that all I can say is I hope that, I guess if I have to pick one of the two routes or explanations, I guess I would prefer the idea that Luffy wasn't using Advanced Conqueror's Haki against Kizaru up till now, but he finally pulled it out for his final attack, and that's why Oda drew all of the, black shading and so much Black Lightning and stuff. That's the assumption I prefer, because even if I think that it's dumb how Luffy handled the fight, it at least feels more logically consistent with us being able to still recognize when Advanced Conqueror's Haki is being used in some sense. Whereas the other route, where it's just like Luffy's been using Advanced Conqueror's Haki all the time since the beginning of Egghead. He used it against Lucci, he used it against the Seraphim, he was using it against Kizaru the entire time. If we go that route, well then it's just like, okay, so now we can never tell when it's being used, or we just always have to assume it's being used, and how effective it is just basically wildly inconsistent, and I don't really like that route. So, Luffy versus Kizaru, it was cool, some of the creativity we got. I preferred last chapter of it. This chapter just left me with a lot of questions, but at the end of the day, it's just not an interesting talking point anymore, because we've got bigger fish to fry, right? So, we will circle back to this conversation the next time Luffy is fighting. Hopefully against Saturn, it'll be more clear whether or not he's using his greatest ability, right? The next interesting point is Bonnie. So, Bonnie, I think, just set us up potentially for the Kuma flashback. I've been waiting and waiting on when this flashback will come into play, because I assume that it would make the most sense for it to have happened during the nighttime, right? We in fact started the flashback, and then we cut away, and then we cut back in the morning when everything had wrapped up during the nighttime. I thought it made a lot of sense to happen during the night, because that way we get the flashback out of the way before the Marine invasion starts. However, I feel like, one, we have to get the flashback at some point before we exit Egghead Island, but two, we have to get it out of the way before the final battle of this arc starts. So I feel almost as though if Saturn is supposed to be the final battle, maybe we just got set up for a flashback to start for Bonnie within the next 1 or 2 chapters. I think that would make quite a bit of sense with the way Oda's been doing things so far, and that, you know, he didn't, to keep the arc interesting, I suppose, he didn't put in the flashback during the nighttime, because at that point in time, I think a lot of readers were already not super interested in the who captured Vegapunk storyline, like who's the traitor, etc. We were already kind of, you know, maybe meandering a little bit and maybe losing some readers' attentions from what I can remember during that time. So including a flashback at that point in time maybe also have been not as interesting to readers, especially with so much crazy outside world stuff going on. However, Oda gave us all the crazy outside world stuff, and then he even gave us a good amount of action at Egghead Island. He gave us Luffy versus Kizaru and a bit of Zoro versus Lucci, so he fed us some cool action, a big plot twist, plot reveal. I guess you wouldn't really call it a twist or reveal, but a big character reveal in that we get to see Saturn's full abilities and the hype around that, etc. So he gave us all this hype stuff. I feel like now might be the perfect time to segue into a backstory if that time is ever going to come. Maybe do it now so that we get the dramatic stuff, we get the dramatic context needed to segue back in then to the battle with Saturn, now having seen, you know, Bonnie's perspective on everything, and us, the reader, really having a good framework for why this battle against Saturn is going to be really important, because we will have gotten a lot of that context out of the Kuma flashback, right? So I think that feels right to me, right? We got some action. Now we get some dramatic stuff, and then we head into the finale, I suppose, against Saturn. At the end of the day, if we don't do the flashback just yet and just keep going and keep rolling for several chapters and get through the entire Saturn fight, I'd be perfectly happy with that as well. But I get the sense that we are going to have to get this flashback at some point, one way or another. So, you know, you can't have a hype train forever. It's time for some actual dramatic, emotional stuff, basically, which I'm sure that we will enjoy just as much in a different way. So, flashback maybe just around the corner, maybe, we'll see. But that's kind of a big deal. And then lastly, I'll just say that the Saturn situation, in terms of like what his ability means for the other Gorosei, it's very interesting because they were able to all transform up in Marijoa without needing the summoning circle, right? The pentagram. They didn't need that at that point in time. So they could all just transform at will up there. But down here on the surface, as Saturn says, it seems that the pentagram is necessary. I don't know exactly what that means. It could suggest that his ability is not Devil Fruit based, but something else. Saturn himself might be a devil or demon of some sort. And some people on stream even suggested that maybe the Gorosei are creations of Imu in some way, and for that reason, like maybe they're drawing on Imu's power or something like that. Maybe not literally his creations, but they draw power from him as the OG devil. They're all miniature devils drawing power from him, and so in that sense, while they're close to him in Marijoa, they can actively and freely use their power. But while they're on the surface, maybe they need some sort of pentagram to be able to unlock or to draw power from their source or something like that, or be able to, you know, call back to Imu's power and gain the ability that he gave them or something like that. So it might just be some sort of linking thing going straight back to Imu, which in that sense makes Imu even more terrifying as an all-powerful god who can create these beings, or even if they're normal celestial dragons, be able to give them this much power. At the end of the day, they might also just be normal devil fruits, but then that doesn't really explain why they need the summoning circle. So I think that there is something more at play there, but I don't know quite what that is yet, so let me know in the comments below if you guys have some good ideas. Lastly, let's hear from the voice of the people. This is of course a contribution from one of my top tier of patrons. So Chinua Alabatia says, I think trying to find signifiers for awakened Zoans is pointless when Oda's inconsistent with this or Haki. Lol. So, I do think that this is an interesting point. I think that this has become more of an issue since Wano, where we got to learn more about Devil Fruit Awakening and more about Haki, but at the same time, the inconsistency of how this stuff is demonstrated to us in the story, or how this stuff comes through in the story, has really thrown a lot of readers, myself included, for a loop. With Devil Fruit Awakenings, we've seen a lot of Awakened Devil Fruit users, and many of us have picked up on this trend that many Awakened Zoans seem to have this sort of cloud-like effect, but at the same time, it's hard to understand why so many Devil Fruit Zoan users that you would expect who would have Awakened Devil Fruit, such as Kaido, or all of the Tobiroppo, or all of the Calamities, why they don't have it, but then someone like Kaku, or even the Impel Down Guards. But then the Impel Down Guards didn't have clouds and stuff around them, so maybe incomplete Awakened Zoan users. But, you know, Kaku has it. Yamato seemingly randomly has an Awakened Zoan, even though nobody else on Onigashima, including her own father, does. Lucci, obviously. we're seeing so many Awakened Zoan users, and then at the same time, we don't have a real explanation as to why someone would have it or not, aside from one simple quote by Kaido about your mind and your body, basically, but that really doesn't explain why, Kaku would have something that Kaido wouldn't, or Yamato would have something that all of the Tobiroppo, all of the Calamities wouldn't. Same with Saturn. It just it feels like there needs to be some more level of consistency, and not just Oda finds it cool to draw clouds sometimes, So I agree with that. At the same time, I think the cloud design is pretty cool. My bigger personal gripe, as I've made clear, is more so with Haki, because at the end of the day, at least with these awakened users, we can tell who is or isn't using it, at least with zones for the most part. But with Haki, we really have so much difficulty being able to tell when something is being used and when it's not. Even this Luffy versus Kizaru fight, I'm going to reread it and try and figure out if we've got any more clues as to was Luffy using Advanced Conqueror's Haki up till this chapter or not. Was this move against Kizaru the first time he used Advanced Conqueror's Haki against him? Was it even Advanced Conqueror's Haki, or was it just a really strong armament attack by him? It's unknown, but, it is what it is. Hopefully Oda starts drawing in some more consistent uses of these abilities as the story goes on, because he wrote them as being so integral and so important to the story that we need that level of consistency just to feel like, things are making sense and characters' improvements are making sense, and just feeling any level of investment at all in the battles that are going on. You need to have an understanding of, what is the system of power that you're selling us on, that all these battles are built around. Otherwise, we're basically just reading some gibberish. So I hope that this stuff becomes more clear over time. But yeah, this chapter again was a reminder of the confusion regarding Awakened Zoans. So hopefully that gets addressed in the future.